Hello and welcome to a new devlog. And you know what? It's PowerPoint time again! Yay! This time, we will delve a little deeper into the game mechanics. And yes, I intentionally used delve to pretend this messy script was written by ChatGPT to give it some redeeming qualities. So, anyway, let's talk about what I'm gonna talk about. So let's start with renown, the main goal of the game. Then we will talk stats and my updated thoughts on the ranking system for servants. Then we will discuss traits yet again. And finally, we will talk about my updated design idea for the customer minigame. Alright, let's begin. And because the Spring Fairy is watching us, we got to clarify what our goals are for the redesign of the renown resource. I want to make collecting renown more fun, but I also want more player interactivity, so I thought about how I could achieve that and came up with a simple idea. The old design was based on just a simple counter, and the goal of the game was initially to just max it out. But it also affected the number and type of customers you would get. And the original idea was to have it like a self-balancing system, that if you raise it too fast, you will get too many customers and lose renown again, because you cannot handle them all. And this obviously works, but it's, in my opinion, just boring. So, new concept. Instead of having just a counter, we have renown levels going from 1 to 10. And instead of getting points for dealing with customers, you get like experience. And when leveling up, you can pick between 2 or 3 effects. So for example, you could pick just getting more customers, which is a good option if you have too many servants and not enough customers to spend the stamina on. But you could also pick the option to get customers of a higher value if you want to concentrate on a smaller set of characters. And this creates more interactivity, more choices, and overall feels like a better design. But what about the stats? Well, what's important to me is that all servants should be viable in all content, because I don't go ahead and create art assets and content for the game that nobody is going to see because it's not optimal. And also, because this is a cultured game, I want players to be able to focus their attention to their favorite characters and actually get something out of it. So, how can we achieve this? In my last design, I had this idea of mimicking the D&D style stat rolls in events with classic RPG stats. But the problem I always see with designs like this is that it shoehorns characters into specific roles that remain the same throughout the entire game. And leveling stats up by increasing the character level also feels very boring, because in the end it's just numbers going up. And there is no agency behind it. So how do we fix stats then? Well, I think there is no real reason to even have them, because remember, we already have traits. So instead, I will introduce 3 leveling characteristics for characters. Basically, experience ranks in working, servicing, adventuring, graded from 1 to 6. You can level up these characteristics simply by using them. So if you let your servant work, you gain working experience. If you go adventuring, you gain adventuring experience, etc. So with enough dedication, you can basically max out all characteristics on a single character. But keep in mind that there is a time limit in this game, so while it should be possible to max everything, it might not be the best idea to do so for multiple characters. So what's the purpose of having ranks for these stats? Well, don't worry. I will come back to this. But for now, let's continue with traits. Because our design goal for traits is making sure that level ups feel amazing. And tabletop games are great at this. So this is where I actually took inspiration from D&D, unlike with stats. But I also want to allow for some customizability of each character, because choices are the bread and butter of any management game. So it makes no sense to not have choices when it comes to your staff. In the old design, traits were preset for each character, and there was a difference between appearance-based and work, service, and adventuring traits. The former being for customer interactions only, and the latter having gameplay implications. And yes, we will keep that in our redesign because I still think it's a great idea. What will be different, however, is that going forward I will plan for traits to be selectable by the user when ranking up in the working, service, and adventuring levels. And basically, you will be able to pick from a pool of traits in each category. So, kind of like a very basic skill tree. And while most servants will share a selection of common traits from a global pool, not every character will have access to all of them. So the choices will be curated by whatever makes sense for each servant. So say, one servant has access to trait A and B, while another one has access to B and C. And I hope this will make each character maintain a certain identity and theme, but still allow for some common ground to prevent the game from needing like hundreds of different traits and exponentially exploding the amount of content that needs to be created. That being said, I think there is definitely some room here for traits that are truly unique to only one servant and cannot be picked by any other, so some exclusive traits will definitely exist. And then I thought of a third trait type, which are conditional traits. So these are basically temporary status effects. I felt like it didn't make sense to build a new system around status effects when we already have a trait system that can basically do the same. So conditional traits could be stuff like a character being exhausted, being injured during adventuring, potion effects, etc. Alright, time to talk about customer interactions. And the goal here is to allow for a limited amount of player interactivity and allowing to have a bit of control over the randomness of the customer events. And in my old design, I just wanted to pick results randomly from a list of predefined events, and there was very little control over the outcome of a customer event beyond having better stats. So instead, I shifted my design idea to mimic some kind of auto-battler design. The idea here is to reduce the randomness of what happens by making clear rules after which the events play out. And multiple choice options and traits on the character will directly result in quantifiable changes that the game will display in case the player wants to deal with the numbers. But just in case, I plan to have an auto mode toggle too that will make the game pick default options in multiple choice events. Because at some point you might want to skip events on characters that you have already built to the point at which they basically always perform at their best anyway. So, how will it all work? There will be a customer satisfaction score, basically a sliding scale of 0 to 100, and then the servant will have a defined number of turns to generate points for that score. So basically we're dealing damage to an inverse health bar. And if we reach a score of 100 within the turn limit, we get the expected good result from a customer event. But this score is only soft capped, so you can overperform and go beyond 100, even if it takes a bit more effort to do so. And when you get to these higher scores, you unlock additional benefits or sometimes even bonus events. Maybe the customer asks for an extension, or you get some extra rewards, or you get more experience, etc. And while most of these turns are automatically resolved, you will sometimes get a multiple choice event during the customer minigame. Choices in those events will be affected by the work, service, or adventuring rank, but also by traits or conditional traits. Sometimes they will just increase the points you score in the minigame, but sometimes they might also completely change the outcome. Maybe you pissed off a customer and need to throw him out. And as I mentioned, these multiple choice events will be optional, so the player can opt out. When playing as a female main character and dealing with a customer, you will have a lot more multiple choice events than with a regular servant. so that the main character feels like an actual representation of the player and not just another servant. And that's what I've got so far. So we reached the end of our presentation, and I hope you will tune in again in the next devlog when we start actually coding all this stuff. So see you again. Toodles!